Margaret Preston's voice was cold and absolute. Your claim has no basis. Ridgemont Estates has operated lawfully for 15 years. Refrain from further unfounded correspondence. Like 15 years of occupation could erase what the deed had. Proven since 1962, like building 1,847 homes, could override the fact that Crestview Development never purchased the land. What she didn't know? I had county records showing no recorded sale or lease. The internal emails where Crestview's CEO planned to build first and settle later. Gambling my great-uncle would die before taking action. And the financial audit proving she'd paid her husband's company $680,000. Without disclosure, $1,800. 47 homes on 2,500 acres, my family owned for 60 years. An HOA president covering up fraud rather than negotiating. A developer who built an entire town on stolen land. Margaret made the mistake every HOA president makes, assuming the quiet teacher who'd inherited land would be too intimidated to hire a lawyer or too naive to check the title records. She assumed wrong. This is the story of how an HOA president lost everything because she couldn't answer one question. Does your association hold title to this land? Because property law doesn't care how many homes you built. It cares whose name is on the deed. But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories. Just like this, the lawyer's office smelled like old leather and older money. I sat across from Eleanor Hartwick, senior partner at Hartwick & Stone, trying not to think about the fact that this single meeting probably cost more than I made in a week teaching high school history. To my great-nephew, Daniel Morgan, I leave all real property holdings in Cascade County, totaling approximately 2,500 acres, together with all mineral rights, water rights, and appurtenances thereto. My hands went numb. 2,500 acres. I'd met my great-uncle Raymond exactly 3 times in my life. Once at a family reunion when I was 7. Once at my grandfather's funeral when I was 15. And once at a diner 5 years ago, when he'd driven through town and called me out of the blue. That last meeting had been strange. He'd ordered coffee, asked about my job, then spent an hour complaining about developers, lawyers, and thieves in suits who think they can steal a man's land while he's still breathing. I'd assumed he was just bitter and paranoid. Old man ranting now, sitting in Eleanor's office. I wondered what he'd been trying to tell me. Is there a house? I asked. My voice sounding distant, Eleanor adjusted her glasses. The property is partially developed. What does that mean? I'm not entirely certain. Raymond's estate records are sparse. But the county assessor lists significant improvements on the parcels. She slid a property tax statement across the desk. Assessed value. $38,400,000? I stopped. Breathing $30-8 million. I made $54,000 a year. I drove a 12-year-old sedan. I had $8,000 in savings and $31,000 in student loans. And I just inherited property worth more than I'd earn in 700 years of teaching. That's a mistake, I said. Tax assessments are based on highest and best use, Eleanor said. The area has been developed. The value reflects that. It's developed how? I suggest you go see it. She handed me a thick envelope. The deed and title reporter in here. You'll need to sign transfer documents, but the property is yours. No liens, no mortgages. Just land. I took the envelope with shaking hands. I called in sick Friday and drove. Out Saturday morning, the address was in Cascade County, 90 minutes east. I'd been through the area once, remembered rolling hills and farmland being carved up by new construction. I followed GPS down a state highway, then onto a pristine 4-lane road marked Ridgemont Parkway. Too nice, too new, landscaped medians. With decorative grasses and trees planted in perfect rows, the road curved through low hills. And then I saw them. Gates. Massive stone pillars topped with wrought iron lanterns. A sign in elegant script, Ridgemont Estates, a master-planned community. My stomach dropped. This wasn't farmland. This wasn't a cabin with some woods. This was a city. I pulled up to the gatehouse, hands sweating. A uniformed guard stepped out. Good morning. Who are you visiting? I'm not visiting. I stopped, unsure how to say it. I own property here. He smiled politely. Yes. Residents use the transponder lane. You'll need to register with the HOA office. Not a resident. I inherited land here. From Raymond Morgan. The guard's smile faded. There's no Morgan on the resident list. He didn't live here. He owned the land. The guard stared at me, then laughed at meanly, just confused. Buddy, there's 1,800 homes here. Shopping center, school, parks. You don't own this. I fumbled for the deed Eleanor had given me. This says I do. He barely glanced at it. You'll need to take that up with the HOA. I can't let you in without authorization. Can I park and walk? No, sir. Private community. I sat there, gripping the wheel, staring through the gates at a neighborhood that stretched farther than I could see. Rows of houses, tree-lined streets, people walking dogs, kids on bikes. A perfectly maintained world, built on land my gretuncle had owned, land I now owned, unless I didn't, unless this was all a mistake, unless I drove to the shoulder half a mile down and pulled over, hand shaking Monday morning. I walked into the Cascade County Recorder's office before first period. Started, the clerk pulled up the parcel records. I gave her the numbers from Eleanor's deed packet. She scrolled, stopped, scrolled again. This is ... a lot of parcels. 2,500 acres. No, she turned the screen toward me. These parcels cover most of Ridgemont Estates. The subdivision plat shows 1,847 residential lots, plus commercial parcels and common areas. All of them trace back to one original deed holder. She highlighted a name, Raymond Morgan. That's my gretuncle. I inherited last month. She scrolled through more records. I don't see any recorded sale. No transfer of title from Raymond Morgan to Crestview Development. No ground lease, nothing, but they built houses. Subdivision plat doesn't transfer ownership, she said carefully. It's a development plan. You still need to buy the land or lease it before you build. Is there anything showing a sale? 10 minutes of searching? No. Based on recorded documents, title is still in Raymond Morgan's name, which means ... double quotes. She hesitated. It's yours now. My vision blurred. So they built 1,800 homes on land they don't own? I can't speak to private agreements, she said. But there's nothing recorded. And in real estate, if it's not recorded, it's not enforceable against third parties. I thought about Raymond in that diner. Thieves in suits. What are my rights? I asked. She looked uncomfortable. You'd need a lawyer. But generally, if you hold legal title and there's no recorded transfer, ... the land is yours. What's built on it is more complicated. Can I make them leave? I really can't give legal advice. She printed the parcel maps and handed them over. But you should talk to an attorney. Soon, I sent an email to the Ridgemont Estates HOA that night, kept it simple. Explained who I was, what I'd inherited, what the county records showed. Asked to meet and review documentation. The response came the next evening, Mr. Morgan. Ridgemont Estates has operated as a legally established homeowners association for 15 years. We have reviewed our records and find no basis for your claim. If you believe you have a legitimate legal interest, you are welcome to retain counsel and contact our legal representatives. Otherwise, refrain from further unfounded correspondence. Regards. Margaret Preston, President, Ridgemont Estates HOA. I read it 3 times. Then I pulled up the county records again. The deed, the parcel maps, every street, every house, every park, and sidewalk and lampposts, all on land titled in my name. And Margaret, Preston, whoever she was, had just dismissed me like I was a crank filing a nuisance complaint. I sat back, anger rising for the first time since this started. I didn't want to evict 1,800 families. I wasn't interested in destroying people's lives, but I also wasn't going to be brushed off by someone living on land my family had owned, since before she'd ever heard of Ridgemont Estates. Raymond had tried to tell me. 5 years ago, in that diner. Thieves in suits who think they can steal a man's land? He'd known. He'd watched them build, and he'd done nothing. What? Why? I didn't have those answers, but I had the deed, and Margaret Preston had just made a critical mistake. She'd assumed I'd go away. I wasn't going away. I was going to get answers. I was going to get respect, and I was going to make damn sure that everyone in Ridgemont Estates, every single resident, living on my land understood exactly who owned the ground beneath their feet, not to punish them, but because the truth mattered, and somebody needed to finally tell it. I hired Catherine Reeves on a Thursday afternoon. Her office was smaller than Eleanor's, located in a strip mall between a tax preparer and a dental clinic. But her website said real estate disputes, and her consultation fee was $200. About what I could afford without dipping into the inheritance money. I wasn't sure it was real yet. She listened while I explained. The inheritance. The deed. The county. Records showing no transfer. The 1,800 homes sitting on land titled in my name. When I finished, she sat back and whistled softly. How much are we talking about in property value? Assessed at $38 million? And you're a teacher? High school history. She smiled slightly. Well, Mr. Morgan, you've either won the lottery or stepped into a legal nightmare. Possibly. Both. Which is it? Let me do a title search and find out. Catherine sent formal letters a week later, one to the Ridgemont Estates HOA, requesting all documentation related to land ownership and development agreements, one to Crestview Development. Group or what was left of it requesting the same. The HOA's response came first, not from Margaret. From a law firm, Whitmore & Associates, Mr. Morgan. This firm represents Ridgemont Estates Homeowners Association. Your recent correspondence contains baseless allegations that threaten to destabilize a residential community of 1,847 families. Ridgemont Estates was lawfully developed, platted, and occupied beginning in 2009. The association holds clear authority over all common areas and infrastructure. Your claim to ownership is without merit and appears designed to extort settlement funds through threats of litigation. Be advised. Any further contact with HOA residents, board members, or staff will be considered harassment. Any public statements regarding your alleged ownership will be treated as slander. We are prepared to pursue all legal remedies, including damages and injunctive relief. You have 10 days to withdraw your claims or face legal action. Benjamin Whitmore. I read it twice, hands shaking. They're threatening to sue me, I told. Catherine over the phone? They're bluffing, she said, trying to scare you off before we start digging, which means they're worried. About what? About what we might find. Crestview Development didn't respond at all. Catherine ran a business search. The company had dissolved in 2016 following bankruptcy. The principal CEO named Richard Brennan and CFO named Patricia Cole had both moved out of state. No forwarding addresses on file. Dead end there, Catherine said. But I did the title search. Need to see this. We met at her office. She had documents spread across the table. The chain of title is clean back to 1962. When Raymond Morgan purchased the original 2,500-acre parcel. No recorded sale, no recorded lease, no transfer of any kind, so I do own it. Legally, yes. But here's where it gets complicated. She pulled out the subdivision plat, dated March 2009. Crestview filed this with the county. Out. It shows there. Development plan lot divisions, street layouts, utility easements. The county approved it. Doesn't that mean they own the land? No, platting is just planning. You can file a plat without owning land. Happens all the time when developers are still negotiating purchase. The assumption is you'll finalize ownership before you start building, but they didn't. Apparently not. She showed me building permits. First permits issued July 2009. First homes sold in 2010. By 2011, they'd built and sold over 400 homes. Raymond died in 2011. I know. She pulled out a death certificate. August 2011, which means construction was happening on his land while he was still alive for 2 years. I stared at the timeline. Why didn't he stop them? It's the question. I spent the weekend going through Raymond's estate boxes. Eleanor had given me 3 bankers' boxes of personal papers when I'd signed the inheritance documents. I'd barely looked at them, mostly old tax returns, utility bills, receipts. Now I went through every page. I found the letters in the second box. The first was dated January 2007, from Richard Brennan at Crestview Development. Mr. Morgan. Further, to our conversation, Crestview Development Group is prepared to offer $8.5 million for the purchase of your 2,500-acre property in Cascade County. This represents a fair market value based on comparable rural land sales. We're prepared to close within 90 days. Please review the attached purchase agreement and contact us to discuss terms. There was no record of Raymond's response, but 3 months later, another letter. Mr. Morgan. We've revised our offer to $10.2 million to reflect your concerns about development potential. We believe this is more than generous for land currently zoned agricultural. However, we need to move forward. With planning and permitting, we'd like to close by September. Please advise then. October 2007, a different tone. Mr. Morgan. We're disappointed you've rejected our latest offer of $11.5 million.
Yes.
We've invested significant resources in planning based on good faith negotiations. Delaying further will impact project timelines and financing. We urge you to reconsider. It's our final offer. And then ... nothing. No acceptance. No rejection. No counter-offer. Just silence. Until March 2009. When Crestview filed the subdivision plat in July 2009. When they started building on land they didn't own. I called Catherine immediately. They just built anyway, I said. Raymond said no. So they ignored him and started construction. That's insane, Catherine said. That's fraud. Trespass, conversion. You can't just build on land you don't own. But they did. Did Raymond ever sue? File complaints? I searched through the remaining papers. I don't see anything. Maybe he was going to and died before he could. Or maybe she paused. Maybe he was waiting to see how far they'd go, letting them dig their own grave. For what purpose? Leverage, Catherine said. If they built a whole subdivision on his land, they'd be desperate to settle. He could have demanded twice what they originally offered. I thought about Raymond, in that diner, bitter, paranoid, complaining about thieves. He'd known exactly what they were doing. And he'd let them do it. The HOA escalated 3 days later. I got an email from a neighbor, someone I'd never met, who'd somehow found my school email address. Mr. Morgan, I'm a resident of Ridgemont Estates. The HOA sent a newsletter warning us about someone making fraudulent claims to our community. They didn't name you, but I looked up the property records after. Seeing your letters to the county, I don't know what your angle is, but you're scaring people. Families live here. Kids go to school here. We're not going to let some opportunist destroy our neighborhood. Back off. I forwarded it to Catherine. They're running a campaign, she said. Turning residents against you before you can build any. Support. Support for what? I'm not trying to evict anyone. I don't know that. Margaret's painting you as a threat. It's working. More emails came, then messages on social media. Someone found my school's Facebook page and left a comment. This teacher is trying to steal homes from 1,800 families. Ridgemont Estates residents contact his employer. He shouldn't be teaching our kids. My principal called me in on Friday. Daniel, I got a complaint. Something about you being involved in a property dispute. I inherited land, I said. There's a legal question about ownership. You trying to evict people? No. I'm just trying to understand what I own. He looked uncomfortable. Keep it off school channels, okay? Parents are already nervous about it. I left his office feeling sick. Catherine called that evening. I finished the title analysis, pulled every document filed in Cascade County related to Ridgemont Estates, and there is no valid transfer. No sale, no lease, no easement grants beyond utilities. The HOA has been operating for 15 years on land they have no legal right to occupy. How is that possible? Best guess? Crestview assumed Raymond would eventually settle. They built the first phase, sold homes, made money, kept building. By the time Raymond died, They had 400 homes occupied and millions in sales. His estate went into probate took years because he had no will initially. Distant relatives fighting over assets. By the time it settled and you inherited, Crestview was bankrupt and gone. The HOA just kept operating, assuming everything was legal because it always had been, but it wasn't. No, the developer committed massive fraud, built an entire town on stolen land, then collapsed before anyone caught on. I sat down, dizzy. What happens now? That depends on what you want, Catherine said. Legally, you could demand they remove everything, homes, streets, all of it. But no court would order that. Too many innocent homeowners. More likely, you'd force a settlement. Ground lease. Purchase agreement. Compensation for 15 years of unauthorized use. How much, conservatively? 50 to 80 million. Maybe more. I couldn't breathe, but they'll fight, Catherine continued. Margaret will claim adverse possession, prescriptive rights, equitable estoppel. She'll argue you're remand weighted. Too long, she'll make this ugly. Public, expensive. She already is. It'll get worse, Catherine said. You prepared for that? I looked out the window at my apartment. 1 bedroom. 1,200 square feet. Student loans and a teacher's salary and a deed to 2,500 acres. That might be worth everything or nothing, depending on whether I was willing to fight for it. I'm prepared, I said. Then we file a declaratory judgment action next week. And Daniel? Yeah, once we do this, there's no going back. Margaret's going to come at you with everything she has. Let her, I said, because Raymond had tried to warn me, and I wasn't going to let thieves win just because they'd been stealing long enough to feel entitled to it. Catherine's office felt smaller the second time I visited. She had a new set of documents spread across the conference table, color-coded tabs, highlighted sections, post-it notes with question marks and exclamation points. I need you to understand the scope of what you own, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. This isn't just houses. She pulled out a zoning map. Different colors marked different land uses. Residential lots, 1,847 homes. That's the obvious part, but look, she pointed to green sections. 3 parks, 2 retention ponds, a community center with a pool and tennis courts. Yellow sections, commercial zone. Shopping center with 18 retail spaces, a grocery store, medical offices. Orange. The elementary school sits on a 5-acre parcel, still titled in Raymond's name. A school. It's built in 2012. The county leases it from. Well, they thought they were leasing it from Crestview, but Crestview never owned it. So technically, they've been operating a public school on your private land without a valid lease. I sat down. How did nobody catch this? 'Cause everyone assumed the developer did their job, Catherine said. The county approved permits based on the plat filing. Homebuyers got title insurance on their individual lots. Those are fine, by the way. You can't take people's houses, but everything else? She gestured at the map. Streets, sidewalks, utilities. Common areas. Commercial parcels all built on land the HOA and the county have been treating as public or HOA-owned for 15 years. She pulled out financial records. The HOA has collected approximately $47 million in dues since formation. They've issued $12 million in bonds for infrastructure improvements. They manage assets valued at over $8 million: clubhouse, pool, equipment, reserves, on land they don't own. Correct? I stared at the numbers. What happens to all of that if I prove ownership? Legally, you'd have a claim to compensation for unauthorized use, possibly rent for 15 years of occupation, possibly damages. For the bonds they issued using land they had no right to leverage, how much are we talking? She met my eyes. Conservatively, $60 to $90 million. The room tilted.
It is not real. It's very real, Catherine said.
But here's the thing, you'll never see most of it. The HOA doesn't have that kind of money. They'd go bankrupt. Homeowners would face special assessments they can't afford. It would be financial chaos. So what's the point? Leverage, she said. You use the legal reality to force a fair settlement. Long-term ground lease at below-market rates. Maybe a one-time payment for past unauthorized use. Something that acknowledges your ownership without destroying 1,800 families. I nodded slowly. That's what I want. I'm not trying to ruin people's lives. Good, Catherine said, because Margaret Preston is about to make you look like you are. The HOA's emergency meeting was announced that evening. I only knew about it because a teacher at my school who lived in Ridgemont Estates forwarded me the notice. Urgent. Special board meeting. Fraudulent land claimant. Individual claiming ownership of Ridgemont Estates. Property has threatened legal action against the HOA and residents. The board will meet Thursday at 7 p.m. to address this matter and authorize defensive measures. Attendance strongly encouraged. Should go, Catherine said when I called her. The notice says board members and residents only. Exactly. They're going to talk about you without you there. That's a problem. I drove out Thursday night anyway. Parked outside the gates, walked up to the Gordos. Different guard this time. Older, less friendly. Residents only tonight, he said. There's a meeting about me. I'd like to attend. You're not a resident. It's a public meeting about a legal matter I'm directly involved in, sir. I'm going to ask you to leave. Through the gates, I could see cars streaming toward the clubhouse. Dozens of them. I stood there, helpless. While an entire community gathered to discuss my future without me, the local news picked it up the next day. HOA fights to protect community from land claim. The segment showed Margaret Preston standing in front of the Ridgemont Estates sign, looking calm and reasonable. We have a responsibility to protect 1,847 families who bought homes here in good faith, she said. This individual is attempting to exploit a clerical error to extort money from hard-working homeowners. We will not allow one person's greed to destroy our community. The reporter asked, what's your response to his claim that he legally owns the land? Our attorneys have reviewed the matter thoroughly. His claim is baseless and vexatious. We're confident the courts will dismiss it. They didn't interview me, didn't ask for my side. Just ran with Margaret's framing. Greedy opportunist versus innocent families. My phone started buzzing within an hour. Messages from people I'd never met. You're disgusting. These are people's homes. How much money do you want? Just name your price. And leave us alone. I hope you get what's coming to you. I turned my phone off and sat in my apartment, feeling sick. I found my car keyed 2 days later. Deep scratches along both sides. Thief gouged into the driver's door. I filed a police report. The officer took photos, gave me a case number, said there wasn't much they could do without witnesses. This related to that Ridgemont thing? He asked. Probably. He shook his head. People get crazy about their homes. Be careful. Catherine called that afternoon with more bad news. The HOA passed a resolution last night. They're assessing every homeowner a special fee, $500 each, to fund litigation against you. That's $900,000 for their legal war chest. Can they do that? Technically, yes. Special assessments for legal defense are allowed under most HOA bylaws. Margaret's telling homeowners they're protecting their property values by fighting the person who actually owns the land. She's betting you'll back down before it gets to court. Most people would. I'm not most people. I know, Catherine said, which is why I kept digging into the HOA's finances. And Daniel, I found something. We met at her office that evening. Catherine had pulled 3 years of HOA financial records through public disclosure requests and discovery motions. Margaret Preston has been on the board for 8 years, president for the last 5. Look at this. She showed me a contract. The HOA pays a consulting firm called Summit Community Advisors, $180,000 annually for management and planning services. Okay. Summit is owned by Margaret's husband, Gregory Preston. Stared at the contract. It's illegal self-dealing under state HOA law. Board members can't approve contracts where they have a financial interest without full disclosure and membership. Approval, there's no record of either. She pulled out more documents. It gets worse. In 2019, the HOA issued $12 million in bonds to renovate the clubhouse and build a second pool. State law requires a membership vote for bond issuances over $5 million. Let me guess. No vote. The board approved it unilaterally. Margaret's signature is on the authorization. Is that illegal? Completely. And here's the kicker, those bonds were secured against HOA assets and future dues revenue. But the assets sit on land the HOA doesn't own, which means the bonds might be fraudulent from the start. I felt something shift. So Margaret's been breaking the law for years. Yes, and now she's using HOA funds collected partly through illegal means to fight you. While telling homeowners, you're the threat? Can we use this? Absolutely, but Daniel, Catherine leaned forward. If you expose this, Margaret's career is over. The HOA could face state sanctions. Homeowners might have grounds to sue the board. It'll be chaos. Good, I said. She's been lying about me. Turning people against me, vandalizing my car. We don't know that was her. It was her people. I stood. I'm tired of being painted as the villain. Margaret's the one breaking the law, not me. Catherine nodded. Then we file next week. Declaratory judgment action. We ask the court to confirm your ownership and order the HOA to negotiate in good faith. We include the financial misconduct as evidence that Margaret's leadership is compromised. Do it. The complaint was filed on a Monday morning. Daniel Morgan v. Ridgemont, Estates Homeowners Association. We asked the court to confirm Daniel Morgan's ownership of the 2,500 acre parcel, declare the HOA's occupation unauthorized, order good faith negotiations for a ground lease or purchase agreement, investigate financial misconduct by HOA. Leadership Margaret's. Counterclaim came 3 days later. Ridgemont Estates HOA v. Daniel Morgan, she claimed. Adverse possession, 15 years of continuous occupation. Prescriptive easement, use of land without objection. Equitable estoppel, Raymond's, silence implied consent. Damages for harassment and tortious interference. Her attorney's statement to the press. Mr. Morgan is attempting to steal a community built by honest families. We will fight him in court and win. My principal called me in again. Daniel, this is getting out of hand. Parents are calling. Board members are asking questions. I'm the victim here, I said. I inherited land. They built on it without permission. I'm just trying to get what's legally mine. I understand, but maybe you could settle? Take some money and move on? That's what they want. For me to go away so they don't have to admit what they did. He sighed. Just ... keep it out of school, okay? I walked out, furious. Everyone wanted me to disappear, to accept being stolen from because fighting back was inconvenient. But Raymond had fought in his own way, and I wasn't going to let his land, my land, be taken just because thieves had been bold enough to build an entire town on it, Margaret had declared. War, fine. She was about to find out exactly how expensive that war would be. The discovery process started like a slow-motion avalanche. Catherine filed 32 document requests. Tax records, HOA financials, meeting minutes, contracts, development agreements, correspondence with Crestview, title insurance policies, everything. Margaret's attorneys objected to 28 of them. Overly broad, unduly burdensome, protected by attorney-client privilege, irrelevant to the claims. Catherine filed motions to compel. The judge held a hearing. Whitmore. Judge Patricia Donnelly said, peering over her reading glasses, your client built an entire subdivision on land they claim to own. Mr. Morgan says they don't. Discovery into how that happened seems pretty relevant to me. Your Honor, the HOA's internal financial matters have no bearing on the title question. They do if Mr. Morgan is claiming unauthorized use and seeking compensation. The judge said, motion granted. You have 30 days to produce. Margaret's team appealed. Lost, delayed. Finally, 6 weeks after the original request, we got the first batch of documents, heavily redacted. Entire pages blacked out. Key contracts missing. Catherine filed sanctions motions. It took 4 months to get everything. But when we did, it was worth the wait. The smoking gun came from Crestview's bankruptcy records. Catherine had subpoenaed files. From the trustee handling the developer's collapse, boxes of internal communications, financial records, emails. Buried in the third box, an email chain from 2008 from Richard Brennan, CEO, TO, Patricia Cole, CFO subject. Morgan Property Acquisition. Status pet. Morgan's dug in at $11.5 million. Won't budge. We're already $400,000 into engineering and planning. Can't walk away now. Proposal. We move forward with phase 1 anyway. Get the plat approved, start infrastructure, sell 200 homes. By the time Morgan sees what we've built, he'll have no choice. But to settle, we'll have 200 families living there. Courts won't order demolition. We leverage that into a deal at our original price or better. Worst case, he sues. We settle for less than he's asking now. Best case, he dies or gives up, and we never pay. Thoughts? Patricia's response 2 days later. High risk, but I see the logic. If we can close 200 sales before he takes action, we're in a strong position. Proceed, but keep it quiet. Just don't document. This anywhere official? I read it 3 times, hands shaking. They knew, I said. They knew they didn't own the land and built anyway. Not just knew, Catherine said. They planned it. This was intentional fraud. They gambled Raymond wouldn't notice or wouldn't act fast enough. And when he died before they could settle, they just kept building. Can we use this? Destroys their adverse possession claim? Adverse possession requires hostile occupation, meaning without the owner's permission and without acknowledging the owner's rights. This email proves they acknowledged Raymond owned it. They were planning to buy it eventually. It's not hostile possession. That's trespass with intent to negotiate. Pulled out another document. In Look, Crestview went bankrupt in 2016. The trustees' report shows they owed $34 million to creditors and had $12 million in assets. The bankruptcy wiped out the company. No successor entity. No one left to hold accountable. So the HOA inherited a mess. The HOA is the mess, Catherine said. They've been operating on fraudulent foundations for 15 years. Margaret's been covering it up. The HOA's adverse possession claim fell apart in depositions. Margaret's attorney argued that 15 years of continuous, open occupation should vest ownership in the HOA regardless of what Crestview did. Catherine tore it to pieces. Adverse possession requires 5 elements under state law, she said during one hearing. Continuous, exclusive, open, notorious, and hostile possession. Hostile means without permission and without recognizing the owner's superior claim. She held up the Crestview emails. The developer acknowledged Raymond Morgan's ownership. We're negotiating to buy. It's not hostile, that's permission-seeking that failed. The HOA inherited that failed negotiation. You can't claim adverse possession based on occupation that began with acknowledged trespass. The HOA didn't know about Crestview's misconduct, Whitmore argued. Doesn't matter, Catherine said. Can't adversely possess land when your predecessor acknowledged they didn't own it. The hostile requirement is broken at the source.
Judge.
Donnelly nodded. I'm inclined to agree. This isn't a case of someone occupying abandoned land for decades. This is a developer who knew exactly who owned it, tried to buy it, failed, and built anyway. Not adverse possession. Margaret's face went pale. The financial audit came next. Catherine hired a forensic accountant to review the HOA's books. What he found made Margaret's legal problems look minor compared to her ethical ones. Summit Community Advisors, owned by Margaret's husband Gregory, received $680,000 over 8 years. The contracts were never put out for competitive bid. No other firms were considered. Margaret voted to approve them without disclosing her husband's ownership. That's textbook self-dealing, the accountant testified during a deposition. State law requires HOAs to disclose conflicts and get membership. Approval for contracts over $50,000. This was $680,000 paid to a board member's spouse with no disclosure. Did the services justify the cost? Catherine asked. No. Comparable management firms charge $60,000 to $80,000 annually for communities this size. Summit charged an average of $85,000 per year. The HOA overpaid by approximately $400,000, Catherine. Moved to the reserves. What did you find regarding the HOA's financial health? The HOA is required by state law to maintain reserves equal to at least 70% of estimated future repair costs. Their reserves are at 28%. They're dangerously underfunded. Why? Because dues revenue that should have gone to reserves was diverted to Summit's contracts and to service the $12 million bond debt. The bonds issued in 2019. Correct?
Ow.
Those bonds required a membership vote under state law for any issuance over $5 million. I found no record of a vote, so the bonds were issued. Illegally? In my opinion, yes. Margaret's attorney tried to rehabilitate on cross-examination. Argued the board had discretion. Claimed the reserves were adequate under a different calculation method. The accountant didn't budge. The law is clear. They're out of compliance. And the self-dealing contracts are indefensible. The homeowners started to fracture a week later. A resident named Tom Bradshaw requested the deposition transcripts under HOA disclosure rules. When he read them, he forwarded them to 50 other homeowners within days. Petitions circulated demanding Margaret's resignation. Then the state HOA Oversight Board opened an investigation based on complaints filed by residents, then a class action. The lawsuit was filed by homeowners alleging breach of fiduciary duty. Margaret tried to hold the line, called an emergency board meeting, gave a speech about outside agitators and frivolous attacks designed to undermine community unity. 3 board members resigned on the spot. Tom Bradshaw stood up. Margaret, you've been paying your husband $85,000 a year from our dues without telling us. You issued $12 million in bonds without a vote. You've put this entire community at legal risk because you were too arrogant to admit we might not own the land. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence. The remaining board members, looking shell-shocked, voted 4-1 to remove Margaret as president. She walked out, furious, threatening lawsuits against every single person in this room. But she was gone. Tom called me 2 days later. Mr. Morgan, this is Tom Bradshaw. I'm the new interim HOA president. I'd like to talk if you're willing. I met him at a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and Ridgemont Estates. He was mid-40s, tired-looking, wearing a contractor's jacket with his company logo on it. I owe you an apology, he said. I believed Margaret. Thought you were trying to steal our homes. I was wrong. You didn't know. I should have asked questions sooner. He pulled out a folder. I've read the depositions, the emails, the financial audits. Crestview defrauded your uncle. Margaret covered it up. And we, 1,800 families, have been living on land we have no legal right to occupy. You bought your homes in good faith, I said. I'm not trying to take them, I know. I read your complaint. You're asking for acknowledgement and a fair agreement. That's reasonable. He paused. Margaret wanted war. The new board wants peace. Can we negotiate? That's all I've wanted from the start. Good, Tom said. Because we can't afford to fight you. Not financially, not legally, not morally. You own the land. We need to make this right. The court hearing 2 weeks later felt different. Judge Donnelly had reviewed the discovery materials, the emails, the financial audits, the deposition transcripts. I've seen enough, she said. Mr. Morgan's title claim is strong. The developers' emails prove they knew they were trespassing. The HOA's adverse possession claim fails. The financial misconduct undermines the HOA's credibility. Whitmore stood, Your Honor. We'd asked for time to present our full case at trial. Miss Whitmore, your client just fired your actual client. The new board is here. Judge Donnelly gestured to Tom, and 3 other board members sitting in the gallery. Who are you representing? Whitmore looked confused. The ... Ridgemont Estates HOA. Then talk to them, the judge said. Mr. Bradshaw? Does the HOA still want to proceed to trial? Tom stood. No, Your Honor. We'd like to pursue settlement negotiations. Excellent. I'm ordering mediation within 60 days. Both parties will attend in good faith. Ms. Marsh, Mr. Morgan, are you amenable? Yes, Your Honor, Catherine said. The judge turned to Whitmore. And you, Counselor? Whitmore glanced at Margaret, sitting alone in the back row, arms crossed. Your Honor, I'll need to consult with the current board leadership. You do that? Judge Donnelly said. But let me be clear. This community was built on land Mr. Morgan owns. The legal question isn't whether he has a claim he does. The question is what fair compensation looks like. I strongly encourage settlement, because if this goes to trial and Mr. Morgan wins, the remedy could be far more expensive than anything you'd agree to in mediation. She closed the file. Mediation scheduled for March 15th. Don't waste the court's time or each other's. Figure this out. I walked out of the courthouse with Catherine. We won, she said. We got a chance to negotiate, I corrected. That's winning. 6 months ago, they denied you even had a claim. Now the judge is telling them to settle. I looked back at the courthouse. Through the windows, I could see Margaret arguing with Whitmore. Alone, furious. Out of power, Tom walked out a different exit, phone to his ear, already coordinating with the new board. Think they'll be reasonable? I asked. Tom will be, Catherine said. He knows you hold all the cards. The question is whether the other 1,800 homeowners will accept reality or keep fighting. They're not fighters, I said. They're families who bought homes and got screwed by a developer, just like I inherited land and got screwed by the same developer. We're both victims, and let's find a solution that works for everyone, Catherine said. For the first time since this started, I believed we could. The courtroom was standing room only. I'd arrived 45 minutes early and still barely found a seat. Homeowners packed every bench. TV cameras lined the back wall. Reporters sat with notebooks ready. I recognized faces from Tom's board: Lisa Chen, the new treasurer, David Martinez, the secretary. Others I'd never met, all watching me with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Margaret sat alone in the far corner, arms crossed, refusing to look at anyone. Judge Donnelly took the bench at 9 sharp. This is the trial in Morgan versus Ridgemont Estates Homeowners Association. We're here to determine ownership of the underlying land and what remedies, if any, are appropriate. She looked at the gallery. I know many of you have a personal stake in this. I'll ask for quiet and respect. Outbursts will result in removal. Tom's attorney, a calm, methodical lawyer named James Sullivan, stood first. Your Honor, the HOA acknowledges that title records show Mr. Morgan's ownership. We don't contest that. What we ask this court to consider is equity. 47 families purchased homes in good faith. They relied on title insurance, inspections, and the assumption that the developer had done its job. They've lived here for up to 15 years. They've paid dues, maintained property, built lives. He gestured to the gallery. These aren't squatters. They're homeowners who were defrauded by Crestview Development. Mr. Morgan inherited land, but these families invested their life savings. Equity demands. We recognize their reliance in fashion, a remedy that doesn't punish innocent people for a developer's fraud. Judge Donnelly made notes. Mr. Sullivan, are you arguing your clients own the land through adverse possession? Your Honor, we've withdrawn that claim. We're arguing equitable relief. Court-imposed ground lease or purchase agreement that protects homeowners while compensating Mr. Morgan fairly. Understood, Ms. Marsh? Catherine stood, carrying a single folder. Your Honor, my client doesn't dispute that homeowners acted in good faith. But good faith doesn't create ownership. The deed is clear. The title chain is unbroken. Crestview Development never purchased this land. They built on it anyway, knowing they were trespassing, gambling that the owner would settle or die before taking action. She opened the folder and pulled out the email chain. We have internal communications proving Crestview's CEO planned this. Fraud. Quote, we'll build first, settle later. By the time Morgan notices, we'll have sold 500 homes, and he'll have no choice but to deal. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. That's not a good faith mistake, Catherine continued. Calculated theft. And when Crestview went bankrupt, the HOA inherited the consequences. Mr. Morgan has been patient. He's tried to negotiate. He was met with hostility, threats, and a smear campaign. All he's asking for is what the law guarantees, acknowledgement. That the land is his and fair compensation for 15 years of unauthorized use. Judge Donnelly nodded. Call your first witness. Catherine called me to the stand. I walked past rows of homeowners, feeling their eyes on me. Some sympathetic, most wary, a few openly angry. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. Catherine took me through the basics: the inheritance, the discovery, the county records, my attempts to reach out to the HOA. "What did you want when you first learned about Ridgemont Estates?" she asked. "Answers," I said. I didn't understand how 1,800 homes could be sitting on land I'd just inherited. Wanted to know if there was a lease, a purchase agreement, something I'd missed. I assumed there had to be an explanation. And when you discovered there wasn't, I wanted acknowledgement. I wasn't trying to evict anyone. I just needed the HOA to admit I owned the land and work out a fair arrangement, did they? No. Margaret Preston accused me of fraud and extortion, threatened to sue me, turned the community against me, told the media I was trying to steal people's homes. Were you? No. I'm a high school teacher. I make $54,000 a year. This inheritance is the most valuable thing I've ever owned, and I wanted it treated with respect, not stolen because someone built on it without permission. Catherine nodded. What do you want now? I looked at the gallery. At Tom. At the homeowners watching me. I want a fair agreement, I said. I don't want to displace families. But I also won't be told I don't own land that legally belongs to me. My great-uncle fought Crestview for years. They tried to lowball him, and when he said no, they built anyway, not letting them win just because they died and left the HOA. Holding the bag, Sullivan cross-examined, trying to paint me as inflexible, opportunistic. You inherited this land for free, correct? I inherited it from family? You didn't pay for it? My great-uncle paid for it in 1962? And now you're asking for millions in compensation for land you didn't buy. I'm asking for compensation for 15 years of unauthorized use, I said. If someone built a house in your backyard without permission, would you let them keep it for free? These aren't houses in a backyard, Mr. Morgan. These are 1,800 families living on land they don't own, I said. I didn't create that problem. Crestview did. And Margaret Preston made it worse by lying about it instead of fixing it. Sullivan tried to push further. I didn't break. Catherine had prepared me too well. The trial lasted 3 more days. Tom testified about the HOA's finances. The bond debt, the reserve shortfall, admitted they couldn't afford to buy the land outright. A title expert confirmed the deed chain, the lack of any transfer, the validity of my ownership. A land appraiser testified that 2,500 acres were worth between $95 million and $120 million. Based on current development and use, the courtroom gasped. Sullivan tried to argue. The value should be based on 2007. Agricultural prices may be $12 million since that's what Crestview should have paid, Catherine countered. The developer's fraud doesn't cap Mr. Morgan's compensation. He's entitled to fair market value for what was actually built, not what should have been negotiated 16 years ago. Judge Donnelly took it all in, made notes, asked clarifying questions. On the 4th day, she called both sides to the bench. I've heard enough, she said. I'm ready to rule. The courtroom went silent. Judge Donnelly opened her file and looked at the gallery. This case presents a conflict between legal rights and human realities. I'm going to address both. She turned to me. Mr. Morgan, the title evidence is unambiguous. You own the land. All 2,500 acres. The deed is valid. The chain of title is clean. No sale, no lease, no transfer ever occurred. Dear great-uncle owned it. You inherited it. That's the law. Oh. Relief washed over me. However, the judge continued, the developer's conduct was fraudulent. Crestview Development knowingly trespassed, built an entire subdivision, and gambled they could force your uncle into a settlement. They were wrong. They went bankrupt before resolving it. The HOA, acting in good faith initially, has been operating on a foundation of fraud for 15 years. She looked at the homeowners. The families living here are innocent, bought homes relying on title insurance and the legal system. They've paid mortgages, raised children, invested in this community. This court will not order mass evictions. Equity forbids it, Tom exhaled. But equity also requires acknowledging Mr. Morgan's rights. He didn't ask for this mess. He inherited it. and he's entitled to fair compensation. Judge Donnelly closed the file. Here's my ruling. Title to the 2,500 acres is confirmed in Daniel Morgan. The HOA's occupation is unauthorized and must be remedied. However, I'm not ordering demolition or displacement. Instead, I'm ordering the parties to negotiate a ground lease or land purchase agreement within 120 days. She outlined parameters. The lease rate or purchase price must reflect fair market value, not depressed value based on the developer's fraud. Mr. Morgan cannot be forced to accept below market terms. However, homeowners cannot be displaced or subjected to unconscionable costs. The agreement must balance legal ownership with equitable protection. She appointed a special master, a retired real estate judge, to oversee negotiations and report back. Impose terms, but I strongly encourage settlement. Hey, your neighbors. You'll be living with whatever we decide here. Make it something you can all accept. She gavelled. Court adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Some homeowners looked relieved, others angry. A few were crying. Margaret stood and stormed out, shoving past reporters without a word. Tom walked over to me, hand extended. Mr. Morgan, you won. Congratulations. I shook his hand. I didn't want to win. I wanted fairness. You got both, Tom said. And now we need to figure out how to make this work. Can we talk? Off the record, just neighbors trying to solve a problem? Lisa Chen joined us, looking nervous. We can't afford to buy the land outright. The HOA is broke, but we can structure a lease. Something fair, long-term, affordable for residents. What I want, I said. I'm not trying to get rich off this. I just want acknowledgement and a fair deal. Tom nodded. Then let's build one. Together. Catherine touched my arm. Daniel, you don't have to negotiate now. You have all the leverage, I know, I said. But leverage isn't the same as being. Right, the judge confirmed I own the land. That's enough. Now I want to do what Raymond should have been able to do 16 years ago. Make a fair deal that respects everyone. Tom smiled. Then let's get to work. We walked out of the courthouse together, me, Tom, Lisa, and Catherine, while reporters shouted. Questions and cameras flashed. I'd won. The land was mine, but the real work, building something fair from the wreckage of fraud, was just beginning. The negotiations started in a conference room at the county library. Neutral ground. No HOA property, no courtrooms. Just folding tables, bad coffee. And 8 people trying to solve a problem that affected 1,800 families. Tom and Lisa represented the HOA board. David Martinez, the secretary, took notes. 3 other homeowners sat on the committee, retired. Accountant, a lawyer who lived on Birch Street, and a single mother who'd been one of Margaret's loudest critics after the financial scandal broke. Catherine and I sat across from them. The court-appointed special master, Judge Richard K.O., sat at the head of the table. Let's start with reality, Judge K.O. said. Mr. Morgan owns the land. The court confirmed it. The HOA has no legal claim. What we're here to do is figure out how. 1,847 families can continue living on land they don't own in a way that's fair to everyone. Questions. No one spoke. Good. Mr. Morgan, what are you proposing? I'd spent 2 weeks working through options with Catherine, talked to appraisers, read ground lease agreements from other developments, consulted with a land use attorney. A 90 ground lease, I said. The HOA leases the land from me at a rate that reflects its value, but doesn't bankrupt homeowners. Lease payments get split, part to me as landowner, part into a fund for infrastructure maintenance, so the community stays functional. What rate? Tom asked. $3 million annually. The room went quiet. Lisa looked stricken. That's $1,600 per household per year. On top of existing HOA dues, most families can't afford that. I know, I said, which is why I'm proposing a tiered structure. Homeowners who want to stay on the lease pay $800 annually, half the calculated rate. I'll absorb the difference for the first 10 years. After that, rates adjust gradually to market, but with caps to prevent sudden spikes. Why would you do that? The retired accountant asked. It's because I'm not trying to punish you for Crestviews. Fraud, I said. I want fair compensation, but I also want this community to survive. Tom leaned forward, the option to purchase. Homeowners can buy the land under their individual lots at fair market value. I'll offer 30-year payment plans at reasonable interest. Once they own their land, they're free from lease payments forever. Catherine slid copies of the proposal across the table. We've modeled this. About 60% of homeowners will likely choose the lease that's more affordable short-term. The other 40% will purchase over time. Mr. Morgan receives compensation. Homeowners keep their homes, and the community remains intact. Judge K.O. reviewed the terms. This is generous, Mr. Morgan. It's fair, I said. Raymond fought Crestview because they tried to lowball him, not doing the same thing to these families. They're victims, too. The settlement took 6 weeks to finalize. The HOA had to amend its governing documents, reform its bylaws, and restructure its finances. Tom insisted on transparency measures that went beyond state requirements. New bylaws included mandatory financial audits every year, published online within 30 days, no self-dealing. Board members had to recuse from any vote involving family or financial interest. Selected oversight committee. 5 homeowners, not on the board, with authority to review contracts and flag concern spending caps. Any contract over $25,000 required membership approval, up in meetings. All board sessions recorded and minutes posted publicly. We're not letting another Margaret happen. Tom said during one negotiation session. I also retained limited oversight rights, not to run the HOA, but to protect the land. Any structural changes to common areas, new construction, or amendments to the lease required my written approval. It wasn't control, it was a safeguard. You're the landowner, Lisa said. You should have a say in what happens to your property. Membership voted to approve the settlement 1,600-42118. Margaret's fall was swift and total. The state HOA Oversight Board completed its investigation 2 months after the trial. Their findings were damning. $680,000 in self-dealing contracts to her husbands. Firm illegal bond issuance without membership vote, failure to maintain required reserves, misuse of HOA funds for personal legal defense. She was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state for life. Fined $50,000. Ordered to repay $340,000 in improper payments. Her husband's consulting firm dissolved. They listed their Ridgemont Estates home for sale within a week. I saw her once more loading boxes into a moving truck on a Saturday morning. She looked smaller, older, defeated. She saw me watching from across the street. For a moment our eyes met. She looked away first. I didn't feel vindicated, just sad. She'd built her identity around control. When that control was challenged, she'd chosen lies over honesty, power over fairness. It had destroyed her. The truck pulled away an hour later. I never saw her again. The town hall happened 3 weeks after the settlement was finalized. Tom had organized it. Rented out the high school auditorium because the clubhouse wasn't big enough. Over 800 people showed up. I stood on stage, nervous, while Tom introduced me. Most of you know Daniel Morgan from the lawsuit. Some of you believe things about him that weren't true. I did too. But after working with him for 3 months, I can tell you this. He's not here to hurt us. He's here to fix a mess none of us created. Applause hesitant at first, then stronger. I stepped to the microphone. I'm not good at public speaking, I said. I teach teenagers who'd rather be on their phones. So I'll keep this simple. Nervous laughter. Never wanted your homes? I didn't inherit this land to become a landlord or get rich. I inherited it because my great-uncle held on to it when developers tried to cheat him. He knew what it was worth. And when they built on it anyway, well, I don't know what he was planning. Died before he could finish the fight. I paused. But I do know he wouldn't want 1,800 families punished for a corporation's fraud. And neither do I. The settlement we've reached isn't perfect. Some of you will pay lease fees. You shouldn't have to. Some will buy land you thought you already owned? That's not fair. But it's fairer than the alternative. A man in the third row raised his hand. What's the alternative? Me exercising full legal rights, I said. Charging market rate lease fees $3,200 per household annually, or demanding the HOA purchase the land outright for $100 million. Filing for ejectment and letting a court decide who stays and who goes. The room went silent. I didn't do any of that, because I'm not interested in winning. I'm interested in fairness. You were lied to by Crestview. You were lied to by Margaret. I'm not going to be the third person to lie and say this situation is anything other than what it is. Complicated, painful, and fixable if we work together. A woman in the back stood. Why should we trust you? Because I'm giving you a choice. I said, lease or purchase. Pay annually or pay over time. Stay or sell and leave. I'm not forcing anyone to do anything. I'm just asking you to acknowledge reality. This is my land. You're living on it, and we need an agreement that respects that. The questions continued for an hour, some angry, some confused, some genuinely curious. By the end, the mood had shifted. Not to gratitude, I didn't expect that, but to understanding. They'd been lied to. I'd been patient. And together, we'd found a way forward that didn't destroy anyone. The financial implementation rolled out over the next 6 months. 1,247. Households chose the ground lease option. Payments started at $67 per month, manageable for most families. Less than a car payment, 600 households opted to purchase. I set up payment plans. 30 years, 4.5% interest, no prepayment penalties. Several families paid cash outright. I took the first year's lease revenue, $96,000, and donated $200,000 back to the HOA for community improvements, new playground equipment, resurfaced tennis courts, renovated clubhouse, updated pool filtration system. Tom called me after the first improvement was completed. You didn't have to do this. I know, I said. But if I'm going to be the landowner here, I want the community to thrive that benefits everyone. People are noticing, he said. They're starting to see you as a neighbor, not an outsider. Good, I said, because I'm not going anywhere. The case made national news. The town built on stolen land. How one inheritance exposed a developer's fraud. It ran in the Washington Post. The New York Times and on NPR, legal blogs dissected the case. Real estate conferences used it as a cautionary tale. The state legislature took notice. 6 months after the settlement, they passed the Residential Development Transparency Act. It required developers to prove clear title before filing subdivision. Plats enhanced title insurance requirements for all new developments, mandatory disclosure to home buyers if land is leased. Not own criminal penalties for developers who build on land without legal authority. Bill cited Morgan v. Ridgemont Estates in the preamble. A legislator called me, "You've changed how development works in this state. Developers can't pull a Crestview anymore." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd inherited a mess and refused to make it worse. I sat on Tom's back deck one evening, 6 months after the settlement, watching the sun set over Ridgemont Estates. "You could have destroyed us," Tom said. "Legally, you had every right." "I had the power," I corrected. "Rights and power aren't the same thing." "What's the difference?" "Rights are what the law gives you. Power is what you do with them." I sipped my beer. "I had the right to evict everyone, charge maximum rates, make your lives hell. But that would have been using power without responsibility. Just like Margaret did." "You're nothing like Margaret." "I could have been," I said, "if I'd wanted revenge more than fairness." Tom nodded. "Well, for what it's worth, thank you. You saved this community." "We saved it," I said. Together, and sitting there, watching families walk dogs and kids ride bikes on streets built on land my family had owned for 60 years, I realized something. I'd won the legal battle, but we'd won something better. A future built on honesty instead of fraud. On fairness instead of exploitation. On neighbors working together instead of fighting. Raymond had held on to this land because he knew what it was worth. I'd kept it for the same reason. Not the money, the principle. And now, finally, Everyone in Ridgemont Estates understood that 2 years after the settlement. I sat across from a nervous law student in a coffee shop near campus. Her name was Rachel Kim, third year at the State University studying property law. She'd emailed me through the school after her professor assigned my case as required reading. "I have a question that's been bothering me," she said, notebook open. Pen ready. "Okay, you had total leverage. The court confirmed you owned everything, the land, the streets, all of it. You could have forced them to pay market rates, demanded $100 million, made them all pay or leave. Why didn't you?" I stirred my coffee, thinking about how to answer. "What do you think I should have done, honestly?" She leaned forward. "I think you left money on the table. My professor said the land was worth $95 million minimum. You settled for a lease structure that'll take 40 years to reach half that value. You could have squeezed them. I could have," I agreed. I looked out the window at the street. People walking, living their lives, going about their day without fear that someone would use legal power to destroy them. "'Cause ownership without responsibility is just another form of tyranny," I said. "I owned the land. Legally, clearly, unquestionably. But 1,800 families had built lives there. They'd been defrauded by a developer, misled by their HOA president, and caught in a mess they didn't create. I could have used my ownership to punish them, or I could have used it to build something fair. But you gave up millions, I gave up nothing," I interrupted gently. "I inherited land I didn't pay for. I'm receiving lease payments and purchase installments that'll total $60 million over 30 years. I'm financially secure for life. What did I give up? The chance to be cruel? The opportunity to exploit people who were already victims?" Rachel wrote something in her notebook. "My professor said you showed restraint. I showed responsibility." I corrected. "There's a difference. Restraint implies I wanted to punish them and held back. I didn't want revenge. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to understand the land was mine, to treat me with respect, and to build an agreement that worked for everyone. That's not restraint. That's just being a decent human being. But Margaret Preston, the HOA president, she fought you, lied about you, made your life hell. She did. And she lost everything because of it. Her position, her reputation, her home. I didn't have to destroy her. Her own choices did that." Rachel looked at me. "Do you think she learned anything?" "I think she learned that power without accountability doesn't last," I said. Whether she learned why that matters, I doubt it. The community had transformed in ways I hadn't expected. Tom Bradshaw served his third consecutive term as HOA president. Lisa Chen remained treasurer. David Martinez had stepped down, replaced by a retired teacher named Patricia, who brought the same known sense energy to budgets that she'd brought to classroom management. The HOA published quarterly financial reports. Online, detailed, transparent, audited by independent accountants. Reserves had climbed back to 82% of required levels. Dues stayed flat for 2 consecutive years. Because they'd eliminated waste and renegotiated contracts at competitive rates. Violations dropped to near zero. Not because the rules disappeared, but because the board enforced them reasonably. Genuine safety issues got addressed. Petty aesthetic complaints got ignored. "We're not the HOA police," Tom told me once. "We're the HOA service providers." Big difference. The community had started an annual event, Founders Day. It wasn't about me, though they'd asked me to speak the first year. It was about acknowledging the land's history, Raymond's ownership, the fraud Crestview committed, the settlement that saved the neighborhood. They'd installed a plaque near the main gates. Ridgemont Estates, built 2009 to 2014, on land owned by the Morgan family since 1962, established through fair agreement. 202 for a community built on honesty, transparency, and respect for Allied. Cried the first time I saw it. I met Tom and Lisa for coffee on a Saturday morning. 2 years to the day after the settlement was finalized, we sat in the clubhouse, cafe renovated with funds from the lease payments I'd donated back to the community. "We almost lost everything," Lisa said, stirring sugar into her latte. "If you'd been vindictive, if you'd demanded maximum payment or forced sales, half these families would have had to leave. You didn't lose anything that was actually yours." I said, You lost the illusion that you owned land you didn't. That's different, Tom nodded. Still, you could have made it brutal. You chose not to. It wasn't a choice, I said. It was the only option that made sense. I wanted fairness, not destruction. Was it worth it? Lisa asked. The fight, I mean? The legal fees, the stress, the harassment. I thought about the keyed car, the threatening emails, the principal calling me in, the months of uncertainty and fear. Yes, I said, because the alternative was letting fraud win. Margaret and Crestview stole from my uncle. Then they tried to gaslight me into thinking I was wrong for asking questions. If I'd walked away, they would have kept doing it to others. Well, Tom said, you didn't just win, you changed things. The state law that passed, the new title requirements, that's because of you. That's because of Raymond, I corrected. He's the one who fought them first. I just finished what he started. The case had indeed traveled far. I'd been invited to speak at 3 law schools, 2 property rights conferences, and a local government symposium on development oversight. I'd declined most, but accepted one a panel at the State Bar Association on ethical resolutions to complex title disputes. A professor from Georgetown wrote a law review article analyzing the case, titled Morgan v. Ridgemont Estates, Balancing Legal Rights and Equitable Remedies in Mass Development Fraud. I'd read it twice and understood maybe half, but the conclusion stuck with me. Morgan demonstrates that legal victories need not be Pyrrhic. By prioritizing fair resolution over maximum compensation, the plaintiff achieved both vindication of rights and preservation of community, a model for future disputes involving innocent third parties caught in developer fraud. Catherine had framed it and hung it in her office. You're a case study now, she'd said, grinning. I'm a high school teacher who inherited land, I'd replied. You're both. Live with it. I was walking through Ridgemont Estates one evening. I did a few times a month now, just to see the neighborhood, when a kid on a bike rode up, maybe 11 years old. Wearing a soccer jersey, backpack slung over one shoulder, he slowed down, staring at me. You're Mr. Morgan, right? I am. You're the one who owns this whole town. I smiled. I own the land under it. The town belongs to the people who live here. Thought about that. My dad says you could have kicked everyone out, but you didn't. Your dad's right. I could have. But that would have been cruel. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Why not? Because power, without responsibility, is tyranny, I said. I had the legal right to make everyone leave or pay me huge amounts of money, but they didn't deserve that. They were victims of the same fraud my uncle was, so we worked together to fix it. The kid nodded slowly. My dad also says, you're the reason the HOA isn't mean anymore, I laughed. The HOA isn't mean because people like your parents elected good leaders. Tom, Lisa, Patricio. They care about fairness. That's the difference. Do you still own the land? The deed has my name on it, I said, but this is everyone's home. My job isn't to control it. It's to make sure the rules are fair for everyone, even the people in charge. He grinned. Cool. Rode off, pedaling toward a group of kids playing basketball in a driveway. I stood there, watching the neighborhood settle into evening, lights coming on in windows, families sitting down to dinner, dogs being walked, sprinklers running on lawns, a community built on land. My family had owned for 60 years land that Crestview had tried to steal, land that Margaret had tried to control, land that now finally served the people who lived on it I'd fought for. 2 years to prove a simple truth: ownership comes with responsibility. You can't just take because you have power. Can't just lie because you have authority. Can't just ignore the law because you think you're entitled to. The system had worked. Slowly, painfully, expensively. But it had worked. And now? Walking through streets named after trees that used to grow wild here? Past homes built on pasture my great-uncle had walked? I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not because I'd won, because we'd built something fair from the wreckage of fraud. The deeds still had my name on it, but Ridgemont Estates belonged to everyone now, and that, I realized, was exactly how it should be.